Once you build momentum, as we were talking before, and you show the bottom line, and you show the return, and you show the KPI of how much it was improved, then you will get the money and the space to do it more formally and get people involved and have the leadership to invest in it.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. And like all of these episodes, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with different people in the process space, BPM practitioners. And today I get the absolute privilege of sitting down with Maria Madariaga. And Maria is a business process consultant at Macquarie Group, has an extensive background in this space and particularly working with people, working with those end users, those process practitioners. How do you actually get buy-in from them to actually put those new improvements into practice? And I know that's can be a huge challenge for some organizations, understanding your processes, improving them, but how do you actually see that outworked in the organization? So Maria, thank you so much for sitting down with me.
Oh, please, my pleasure. I'm actually, thank you for considering me for this series. It's very interesting.
That's great. And so what we might do is if you can take myself and our audience on a bit of a journey back to when the topic of BPM was first introduced to you, and then take us on a journey leading up to what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I think from the beginning, I remember my first role fresh out of uni. My background was accounting. I did a bachelor in accounting and back in Buenos Aires, now in Australia. But I started my first job in a big company, Chevron. So it's massive. They move a lot of money. I actually was doing process for the US. So that's even bigger scope. And I remember having this issue in one of the process. I was doing financial reporting, tax in particular. And I had the same issue. And we had this solution, which was write it off, like immaterial. For the amount of volume, the amount of money for the company was immaterial. And I was like, I just wanted to understand. So I went inside on the backgrounds and understand what the system was doing and understand the process, the end-to-end process, and work with an IT person for about 2 years on what was the settings and which piece was triggering this issue from a tax perspective. So we had to analyze the whole process and see what was the defect or what was the bug, call it, in the system. And I know that from his side, he was so proud after 2 years when we figured it out. And I think he got even like a prize or reward. From my side, not much, because honestly it was a write-off, like it was not much. But I remember like that thing about understanding the whole process and your role in that process and that piece of the puzzle and how the data gets communicated and worked around and being able to improve it was really rewarding. It was not necessary recognition, like of course, an evaluation of performance and so on, but it was a personal growth, if you mean. And then from there, I got like really, it's like was my bite, like I got into it and I was like, I never went back. Like I cannot do things without understanding the process behind it.
Yes. Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's really interesting. A point you made to begin there with is, I think it was that curiosity that drove you to understand why. And I think that's why is it always done this way, or why do we do it like this? And I think that's a common thread I'm finding, or I'm noticing in this series, the different people I'm talking to that are, are involved in process. There is this natural curiosity of like, well, why is it done this way? And how can we improve it? How can we make it better? And not just looking internally at the organization you're working with, but well, what's being done in other industries? What are other sectors doing for this process, or how are they navigating this? And how can we implement some of those improvements or innovations that are being seen in other industries? How can we implement that in our own? But when an organization adopts business process management, what are some of the biggest challenges that they may face?
Well, I think it's standardization. I mean, like first thing is like to know the unknown, right? So different people may have diverted. I mean, initially there should be a process. Most of the companies I worked for were really big, so BPM was there, right? And American work on the SOX, so they need to have the SOX maps and all the operational risk framework done. But I think sometimes people get off track because they have some challenge on the area, whether it's a line of business, it is a particular market, it's particular country regulation, a new regulation introduced, a system back that they don't know about, like we were just talking, and you just do your workaround, right? And I think that's when you have that complacency that you don't work on improving the overall process because you don't understand the overall process. I think that's where it leads to going away from BPM. And that's why now there's a great emphasis about having process owners and having the revisions and making sure that somebody holds that process and the integrity of that process, and make sure that everybody on that value chain understands it and understand their part and plays their part to make sure the company delivers value. So yeah, I think it's unknown, like why people do what they do and they divert, and trying to bring those cases back and fit for all, but also so have a standard solution, but that fits for all, if it makes sense, for all the cases, for these particularities.
Yes.
Inside the scope.
Yes. Right. And what would you say is one of the or the main drivers of business process management? Obviously, there you mentioned regulation. New regulation will drive, an organization to understand their processes. For other organizations that are quite ambitious and maybe quite innovative, they're looking at how do we create the future and what do we need to do to our processes to create the future. For other organizations, it's more about cost cutting and putting out fires that drives them to understand their processes. But what do you see as being the big drivers of BPM?
Well, I think that's again from my accounting, finance background, governance. Like if you need to know your process to know your risk, and to ensure that that risk is mitigated. So risk management, and that is the only way, I think, to ensure continuity and continuity of a company, being able to provide continuously. If you don't have that process and you don't understand your risk, you're in a very vulnerable position to ensure sustainability.
Yes, right.
Anything can happen and can affect you in a way that you cannot even foresee it, right?
Yes, right, definitely. And obviously for an organization that, if they want to invest into BPM, invest into resources, set up the correct structure, maybe have a center of excellence or something like that, the executive team, they're going to really want to understand, well, how does it relate to the strategy of the organization? How does it relate to the overall objections of the organization? Well, what's the return on investment going to be? How long until we realize that return on investment? In some cases, an organization may embark on a huge project and maybe bite off more than they can chew. It takes 2-3 years for them to document their processes. They get to the end of it and then they kind of are left there scratching their head wondering, why did we do all of that work again? What was the purpose of that? And then you've got other organizations that they'll start on a very small scale to prove the value, to prove that it works, to prove that it can work in their organization. But I think one big question is, what is the return on investment? So do you have any examples of some wins that you've seen an organization, I guess, realize because of BPM?
Yeah, so it's just really funny when you talk about projects because I never seen a project that delivered everything that it was included in the first scope. There's always enhancements, but I understand what you mean, like the extent and, I think, you have to have metrics, you have to have KPIs, you have to have a standard that you want to go to and ensure that adoption. I had a big project once. I joined Otis at the time. That was UTC, part of UTC back 4 years. And it was an area that had been through a lot of change. So they went in an outsource model and they also changed their system, they upgraded their system. And they didn't really do a cleanup. They decided to do it all together. So to just train just get an outsource partner that knows the new system and just kind of save their money. And what ended up happening is I think it was too simplified, like the approach that they had to all this change and transition. And there was a lot of backlog. There was a lot of knowledge gaps. There was a lot of communication gaps. There's misunderstanding of on the process. And so I just went in with this kind of a program of increasing the control and like improving the process and enhancing control, right? The controls were there. It's a SOX company, that's why I stopped myself. But definitely there were some issues, and they were like that were recognized in the system. So you have to keep these KPIs. And at the end of the project, I managed to clean $6 million that went back to the projects, the initial projects where these provisions were first taken off the money, and increase the revenue of the project margin. And yeah, a lot of guys in operations got a lot of bonus because of that. I think a higher bonus. But besides that, I guess, yeah, if you want to know that something works, you have to measure it. Like, it's a baseline. It works everywhere, and it works in process as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's huge. That's significant. If I think when an organization, when the executive team can see the value that it's bringing the organization, it brings momentum to that area, and they want to invest more money there. They want to invest more resources. They want to see that same value multiplied across the organization. And so obviously, getting buy-in from that executive level, that executive team, that is one thing that needs to be considered, because you need to have that sponsorship to be able to get that investment, to get the resources available to drive that. But the other thing that needs to be considered is, how do we get buy-in from the end users or the process practitioners, those that, they're the ones that are carrying out the processes, that are in the call center, picking up the phone and talking with the customers, or that are in the warehouse floor, as part of the process. They're the ones that are going to be carrying out that work. And so getting buy-in from them, because if you're going to want to make any changes, they're going to, need to be on board with those changes. And I know that this is a particular area that you spend quite a bit of time in. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you get buy-in from process practitioners?
Yeah. So, as you said, like the leadership is just the bottom line. If you make the numbers work, they are in. If it costs, like you get more than what it costs, they will invest more. It's all about the return on investment. But the users, they may not get bonuses, they may not get any type of reward. They just get discomfort, they get change, they get noise. So yeah, one of the things that I had is working for big companies, multinationals, is you get a variety of users, and you get a variety of locations. You get it is more complex, the people side. And yes, and these users can be from new starters, like full of energy, to people that have been there in the industry for years and they know what they're doing, and it's a little bit, difficult to come and tell them that, what they're doing is not good enough. I mean, they take it a little bit personal. So you first need to always work with empathy and understand where people are coming from. That will help you a lot in the communication, to make sure that your receiver is actually receiving the right message. You may be trying to connect with them and give them a message, but that message may not go through if you don't understand who's receiving it, where they're coming from. I realized that, the approach of change management is always like, try to work with what it is for me, like showing them what is it from them. And yeah, this is a company policy that is required. Sometimes a regulation is required from a government perspective, and so on. But the bottom line for me is to work with them in being, like, I found like the harder people to get that adoption in, like that opposed to change generally, they're like your best friends. They should be your best friends, because whatever they're telling you, you really want to listen to them. Probably they're not saying in the way that you want to listen it, but definitely the way they're telling you is like they're making bulletproof your process. They will find everything that is against it. So you really want to connect with these people. Don't leave it to the end. Like, you don't want to lead, so I'm going to transform 90%, and then that 90% will prove this 10% that they're not. You want to go with that 10%, I think, is a very bad example, like very worst case scenarios, it's less than that, it's not that bad, but you want to target them because they're going to. And second is, most of the times, people being afraid of change, like being scared about making a mistake. They have been doing the same thing for so long,
right.
But they feel that they cannot make a mistake. That it's just, they should know this. And I think that's, it's very, understandable that when there's change, there may be a little bit of error, and there will be a time where there's like this adoption and there's training and people can get confused and make mistakes, and it's okay. Like when you change, that transition time will be there, and there's like system prepared, there's hypercare, there's extra support from if it's a change in the system included, there's a lot of training and sessions and places where they can ask for resources. So that's expected from the user side. They don't know that. They they know, like they feel that they should know it from the first shot. And reaching out and telling them, appreciating the feedback, working with them, taking that, and you turn them. And actually the ones that are post the most, I found them that they change, and it's like kind of a religion. It's like they can never go back. The future is bright and it's greener, and we have to go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think generally those are my approach. Like go early, go open to listen, even if it's not the way that you want them to, you want to get it, but listen to the message is important. And make sure that they understand that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get confused. Change, have that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, as you were saying, getting those people on board that have the most resistance or are the most opposed to any changes, if you can get them on board, if you can create them to be your biggest champions or your biggest supporters, the rest of it's going to be that much easier, because, and I would say that these people that do have a problem with the change or do question things, they're the ones that, they're not doing, they're not passive about it. They're not being, most of the time I'd say they're not necessarily being passive. They're the ones that are wanting to, they're wanting to make sure that, what they're doing, I guess there are a number of motivators and drivers, but they really care about the outcome of this. I guess you could say they really care about the outcome, because maybe it's going to impact them. For some, it's because how does it impact the organization? But if you can get them on board, they really understood, or they really knew why they didn't want the change before. But once you get them across that line, they really know why they like the change. They really know why the change is a good thing. And then they can sort of help you get everyone else on board. So.
Yeah, no, I agree completely.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. That's awesome. And so what are some of when an organization adopts BPM and starting to go through the implementation, what are some of the objections or hurdles, I guess, apart from what we've just spoken about, that an organization will face when adopting BPM?
It won't work. I think that's a typical phrase. It's like they based on exception cases, and you need to really cater for that. It's like most of these users may have been there for a long time, people that are opposed to those changes, and that they don't see the benefit there because they understand all the they have all this backstory that things that happened in the past, and they will come with this that 5 years ago this and this happened. And you need to, again, they are the ones that are going to make your process bulletproof, because is understanding all these particularities about the business and the situations, about things that can happen. I think that's the biggest thing, because risking change, the unknown, right? And they are closing that gap for you. So yeah, it's about ensuring that you get that feedback and you put it into your process, and you consider that when you're building up and how you're going to manage and how you're going to define the future state.
Yes. Okay, great. And when you are getting that feedback, how do you navigate conflicting or contradictory feedback? You might be bringing in a group of people, the stakeholders involved in a particular process. You're trying to understand, well, how is this being done? How is this being executed? You're bringing these different people into a room, and there is conflicting or contradictory thoughts and ideas about what the process is, but also what the process should be. So how do you navigate that? How do you, I guess, facilitate that conversation or that discussion to work towards the best outcome?
Yeah, well, I've been in one of those discussions and they get really heated, especially when you have very senior leadership team and they're like, you would think it would be easier, but sometimes it's better. So I guess there would be these points. And the first thing is to make sure that everybody's in the same page. So I would definitely streamline as it is and what are the key issues. We can mark them and so on. And then we listen to every option, every side, and we pros and cons and try to analyze it with different tools to understand where does the responsibility and where is the capability of fixing it, right? What is the problem? What is the cause? And who could fix it as well? Because that's a big thing. And then you just try to get agreement, which is not easy. I mean, it's one word, but it's like I think one of the most difficult in our language. But getting two people that really don't agree with each other to an agreement on a view, on a perspective is hard. But you can get them there. It takes time. At the end of the day, if you're gonna get that, if it's a very stubborn position, you will need to go to the leadership to take a decision, right? To go up. But and that's kind of a agreement, a leave it imposed, but generally you can get an agreement before that. Like, people start very passionate, but when you break it down, the problem, you understand where is the process, where is the responsibility, who can fix it, and you put a process to, the future state, you agree on a future state that they tend to agree, so that's how you get to agreement, I think.
Yeah, right. And I've had a number of conversations with different people where that, particularly here in Australia, where they are one person in a company of 4,000, 5,000 people, and they've been tasked with the job or the mission to understand the organization's processes and help improve them. They've got a very low BPM maturity. There isn't a whole lot of resources that have been given to this task. How can you do BPM on a very small scale? If you're a team of one, or if you're a team of two, where do you begin? What are the first things you should be doing? Is it understanding the critical processes? Because obviously you can't, if you've got limited resources, you can't look at every processes. What are those first steps, and how should they move forward?
So yes, first understand what is urgent. Like, from all the things that you can improve, there would be one that is more painful than the other one. So
right,
that it affects more your day to day. You need to weight that, and as well, like, it will release a lot of time to work on other processes. So you look into your short term and your long term improvements. I think make sure to balance it, because if you have short term, immediate, you end up being a little bit of a firefighter. So you need to manage your time very wisely there. To remember about like the future, so like the vision, like working on the long-term solution rather than just focus on the short term, and reassign resources. There's a lot of things that you can do in a different perspective. So generally the easier path is not the good path. We know this, but we tend to go with the easier one. So and it's about just thinking in a process mindset, in the sense of, how can you don't think about one time or 1 month or one task. Think about what would you achieve in a year, about like changing the way you do things and what would happen in a year, because you think maybe in the short term it would not really have an impact, but in the long term it will. So these are all, like, I think, tips that I could help if you don't have, and once you build momentum, and we were talking before, and you show the bottom line, and you show the return, and you show the KPI of how much it was improved, then you will get the money and the space to do it more formally and get people involved and have the leadership to invest in it. But yeah, I think that's small baby steps. Sometimes it will take like a lot of baby steps make a marathon. I mean, that's the truth. But we have to be patient.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And when we're looking at the future of BPM, because obviously over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of new technology that organizations are now playing with. We've got robotic process automation, we've got process mining, we've got different things like that. Some organizations are, they are well mature in their BPM, and so they're ready for these new technologies. Other organizations maybe don't have the right culture, they don't have sponsorship, they don't have buy-in. Maybe they're adopting technology because they saw one of their competitors use it and they're like, great, if they're getting value out of it, we're going to get value out of it as well. So obviously every organization is at a different point, but and will require different things at different times. But if we look towards the next 2, 3, 5 years regarding BPM, where do you think organizations should be investing their time, effort, and energy?
Well, that's data, collecting data analytics, creating business intelligence. So for me, it's very clear that we move from a cost reduction, just to increase, then simplification to outsource, and now we're going for automation for business intelligence. The reason you make all that is because it's the only way you can manage all this data and get insights, like breaking down, profile it, get insight from that data and use it. I think there was a big talk about, all these companies that are internet companies and so on, we're not naming anybody, but that they're using this data to create more sales, right? And to target, certain, just been on the news. So it's something that is public. And like the social dilemma movie, let's just call it,
Yes.
Even movies are really interesting. But I think every company is now doing it. They're like,
Right.
Let's just use our information. I know banks are doing it. Banks are creating apps where, they're using like to know where you spend money, and also I think to do the risk assessment as a customer and being able to offer them more products and know which products not to offer. So I think that they, like companies like banks, are creating data analytics departments. I'm not talking particularly about Macquarie, but like I know for a fact, if you look into the market about the roles, and there's a lot of there to serve the customers, but also to know more about the customers, right? And use that data. So I think every company does that in purpose of providing better, more use for the customer, more value for the customer, but as well to get business opportunities. It's a win-win there. So I think that's where automation is going, data.
Yes, right. And I guess as organizations, adopt automation or I guess ultimately creating a better experience for the end user, for the customer, there's going to be an expectation there in the consumer's mind for every other organization that they interact with. If they're getting such an incredible experience with the finance sector, for example, they're going to go to their councils and the communities that they're living in. They're going to expect a similar customer service. They're not going to compute that like, well, banks, they've got a lot of money and that they're very innovative and there's a lot of disruption there. So they're being forced to innovate and things like that. And councils maybe have less of that pressure. It's not like unless I understand it incorrectly, it's not like that council is going to be booted out and replaced with a whole nother council. Maybe individuals will be booted out, but there isn't that same pressure. But the consumer, at the end of the day, the consumer who are, we're walking around with our phones and we're getting an experience, a certain level of experience from particular organizations. We're expecting that from everyone now. We're expecting that from all organizations. So, if you're not if your organization isn't the one that's creating the future, then you're having to play keep up or, play by the rules that are being set, by those market leaders.
Yeah, it's a price to be in the game, basically. It becomes like the price to keep on afloat. Yes, yeah.
And would you say that some of the best ideas, or where do the best ideas come from when we're talking about innovation or creating the future? Do you think it's looking at other markets? Do you think it's engaging with your own customers, your own consumers? Where can organizations go to, to be that market leader?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of innovation, I think from a user perspective, it's always the best. So I would say the customer knows what it needs better, but at the same time, there's a trick there that what we were talking before. When you, actually, as human beings, we have this amazing tool that is called empathy. So you can understand the mindset if you can put yourself in that place. So I think I think soft skills and emotional intelligence are becoming like, I see now like, in jobs searches like risk mindset or emotional intelligence to start working on this, like I would call it super soft skills. So it's not just about knowing how to talk or how to manage your time. It's about being able to relate to people and understand your customer so you can anticipate that need and you can anticipate what you need to be able to satisfy that need, right? And being able to take your IT like investment and strategy, sorry, in the right path. So you are there in 5-10 years to get. Also, it's very, you have to be flexible. That's why this all agile approach, because things change so much that you cannot be very rigid. So you have to constantly be checking where you're going is the right place. In the past, it used to be like, oh, that's where we're going. Yeah, there we go. Like we're going to sourcing. Let's just look which is the one that works the best for us, kind of thing. And I think right now it's not like that simple. What is valuable today? Like recyclable plastic was not valuable. Like having a plastic bottle that is made with recycle, like, so it used to be no matter, like it was just plastic. Then it became like, oh, make sure that the plastic that you're using is recyclable. And now you're making sure that the plastic that you're using has been recycled. It's from recycled plastic, right?
Right.
So, and that was in a very short period of time. It's like, I think in the last 5 years, 10 years, like it changed a lot. Not 5 years, I would say. It just changed like that. People are really conscious about it, and they don't buy. They don't buy if it's not recyclable. And I think that, for example, was something that the companies, I don't know if they thought. I know some supermarkets here had like forward and backwards. Anyway, they had to take decisions, and then for the impact on the line, they had to rethink their decisions. But so it shows how prepared they were, right? How difficult it is to be so flexible in this world. Getting out of topics, I leave it there.
That's right. And for people that are listening right now, that maybe this is one of the first, conversations that they've listened to around BPM. Maybe it is one of those individuals that they're in an organization of a couple of thousand, and they've been tasked to understand the organization's processes. And they're out on the internet, they're doing their research, they're looking around, they're wanting to learn more about BPM. Where would you encourage that person to go to learn more about, not just BPM in general, but what is applicable to their organization in their current state?
I mean, of course, there's a lot of resources. You have a lot of speakers that are from university in this series we were talking before. And you can learn that formally. But I think, for example, this space that you created, I think it's amazing. Like this opportunity to connect and learn about experience, as it's called benchmarking, like seeing what others are doing and trying to copy it. And you have so many backgrounds in terms of like professional background, academic backgrounds, and different industries. I think it is really interesting. I think right now we have the advantage that sometimes, and I still didn't think about YouTube to make it so academic or training, but you get a lot of resources online. So you don't need really money, you just need to spend the time and look for resources and learn. And yeah, I mean, I think it's very valuable to understand how things are done. It's like how you communicate, how you create this function, and how you understand how other people are doing it. I think it's the only way to keep, in the long run, creating value, is to keep on updating and exchanging ideas.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. As you said earlier, things are changing so rapidly. We need to, keep be aware of what is the future going to look like. What are the new trends that will be appearing, and how can we learn about them and adopt them in our organization? Otherwise, potentially left behind. So, but Maria, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me. I know that our audience is going to glean a lot from this conversation. It's been very insightful for me. I've been taking a ton of notes, and so I'm really excited to release this episode. But for everyone that has been listening, I hope you've had your notepad and pen out as well, and have been taking notes. And if you'd like to connect with Maria, if you've got any further questions, ongoing questions beyond what we've spoken about in this podcast episode, then I encourage you to reach out to Maria and connect with her. And connecting with someone that is further down the journey than where you are is definitely something that I would highly encourage and is very valuable. So Maria, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Please, my pleasure. Thank you. I enjoyed it a lot. And yes, please, anybody that wants to connect, I'm always happy to have a talk.